Hi everyone, this is Kathya. Welcome to my channel. Today I have a really cute holiday card to share with you from this stamp set called Art Impressions Lighted Snowman set. And this has a lot of detail to it, a lot of techniques. So I'm going to share with you some epic wins and some horrible failures and how I fixed them. So you can learn from the lessons that I made here in making this card. So to get started, I am using my homemade stamp positioner that my husband helped me make. And I'm using my EK Success powder tool because I plan to emboss the snowman directly onto some watercolor paper that I will be coloring using my watercolors. So I'm stamping this up. I actually stamped this twice, and I really don't think that I needed to do that, but I did it just for good measure, just to make sure I had a good solid impression because I wanted the watercolors to stick in the areas where I was going to emboss. So I stamped it here once, then you'll see I stamp it again, and then I'm going to pull it off of my stamp positioner, and I'm going to use some clear embossing powder to emboss this. I'm going to tap off the excess right here. And then I heat set the whole thing. And after I'm done heat setting the whole thing, I'm going to be putting it on a cutting board with some washi tape to use as a masking around the edges because I want a small border. So I used a different stamp positioner here to place the second piece of my sentiment onto the watercolor cardstock. And I want to basically do this particular piece in a white embossing powder really bright because I'm going to be using a really dark technique using some watercolors. And I am going to heat emboss this in white, and when I put the dark watercolors on top of this paper, you'll see that sentiment come to life. Now this is the 36 Kuretake Gunzai Tombi 36 color watercolor set that I have. And I'm going to be using a couple of them, and I'm also going to be using this Frisket here to mask off the snowman. And I will tell you, one of the lessons I learned is that even though this Frisket is easy to use, I didn't use enough. And you'll see what I mean because the snowman's hat winds up becoming a little bit muted from the dark colors of the watercolor wash that I used for the sky. And hindsight, I should have used a lot thicker of an application here so you can't even see the black lines, but you'll notice that it's a lighter yellow color while I'm doing the snowman here, and I just didn't use enough of it, and I should have put on another layer. Another thing a tip that I learned is to take that brush that you have, and instead of going directly into the Frisket, you can actually put some soap on the brush, and then the soap acts as a way to get off that Frisket a little bit easier. So here I'm putting down a clear wash of water on top of the snowman after I let that Frisket dry. And I plan on doing a lot of watercolor washes with colors of blue, different shades of blue. And then I'm going to be intensifying the color by drying it with a heat gun, and then bringing my heat gun to the paper, drying it a little bit more, and then adding a little bit more color for intensity, and you'll see here what I mean. But notice that sentiment in the top left-hand corner. It really comes to life the darker the application of the paint is, and it is just so much fun. So here's where I get a little impatient, and I kept drying the paper and being very, very careful not to put the heat gun and keep it in one area for too long because I didn't want to burn the paper or mess with the Frisket here that I put on top of the snowman. So I'm just wiping up a little bit of that excess water that was pilling on top of the Frisket. I don't want to damage or try to minimize any type of product getting underneath that. So I mixed in a couple of extra shades of blue together, and you'll see I'm not really an expert watercolor by any stretch, but I have done some painting in the past, but watercolor is certainly not one of my fortes. But you don't have to be an expert watercolor artist, because if you just learn from different people like Christina Warner, she's one of my all-time favorites with watercolor techniques. She's just amazing. I have learned from her to just let the water do the work. And if you dab on a little bit of darker blue here, like I'm going to be doing, you can help the watercolors move a little bit better by adding more water and then continuing to add your heat gun in certain places to make that water move and to make the color a little bit more intense. So you'll see here what I mean. I continue to add a little bit more dark colors here, and this is where I added a little bit of black in with the blue, and then switched brushes from time to time. So there's not really rhyme or reason to how I'm doing this. I just did what I thought would look really cool. And my paper did bubble up a couple of times, but in the end, after doing this several times, what I wound up doing is heat setting it with my heat gun, and then I wound up actually putting a heavyweight canister on top of this after it had completely dried, and that really helped my paper with the warping. So when I came back to it the next morning, the paper was pretty much flat because I had some weight on it, and that helped. So here I am dabbing a little bit more of that darker blue and black mixture, and I really, really love the effect of this whole piece here. So again, I continue to add a little bit more of the darker blue, and I lightened it a little bit in certain areas around the snowman and closer to the bottom. But again, look, I'm just tapping with that blue watercolor there, and I'm being very, very careful to avoid the bottom area because I'm going to try a really fun technique with that with some snow paint, and I'll talk about that in a little bit here. So I continue to add a little bit more blue there, around there, and I like how that really dark effect around the sentiment really pops when you dry this. So here I am heat setting it with my heat gun, and I'm being, again, very careful not to touch a lot of that frisket. I'm just wiping up the excess. And then using this eraser, I removed the frisket, only to discover that I had a little bit of that watercolor ink get directly onto the snowman, but that's okay because I actually wind up saving the snowman's hat by using a similar color for the hat. And where the areas were white, I tried some gel pen that didn't work either, and I'll explain that in just a minute. But I'm using the watercolor pens that you see here, and I'm just coloring the light bulbs in different areas. And for this technique, I only used 2 colors for shading because I really felt like these light bulbs are so small that in order to get like a shading effect, you only really need 2 colors. So I started off with green and then moved to yellow. And I'm speeding this video up just a little bit so it's not so painful to watch. And you'll see that the actual stamp image packaging has this little snowman wearing a vest, but because I had some blue ink from the background sky get onto the snowman itself, I decided to make him completely red. So I created a really long, what I would call like a snowman in a trench coat, so to speak. So it turned out pretty cute, and I'll show you here in a minute. So here I am adding that base color of red, and notice I go way beyond what the vest is supposed to be, and I'm covering it up because that white piece there that got messed up on the paper really was drawing your eye to that because I took a chunk of the paper out by, wiping it away with an emery board. So I'm just laying down the color all the way all over the image of the snowman. So I'm making it look like he's got a coat on instead of a little vest. And I still think this turned out cute. The next one I do, I'll do it in a vest, and I will show you using a different type of medium. So I continued to color using several different colors for the light bulbs, and I am showing different types of colors that I'm using here along the way. And I won't have exactly the same colors that I use, but if you're interested in them, please let me know, and I will link to them on my blog so that you can see exactly which colors that I used. I did 2 shades of orange on his nose as well, and I think that turned out cute. So here's where I took a darker shade of that blue and used that to color in portions of his hat. So see where it's a little bit blue from the background? I thought, why not just work that into the design? So that's sort of how I fixed that. And then I left the white areas white, and my intention was to take a white gel pen and go over those, but you'll see that when I try it, it doesn't really work, and that's probably perhaps because I should have let the watercolor dry even more. But what I decided to do was, instead of using that gel pen, I used some liquid applique on his hat. And I also decided to do this using snowdrops and the snowbank down below on the bottom of the snowman. And it turned out so cute. Now, I didn't read the instructions with this, and apparently you're supposed to put on a thin coat and then let it dry completely. And I had no idea that that's what you're supposed to do, but I winged it and it worked. And some of the areas were so small, I decided to put a little bit of that liquid applique on my desk, on my mat, working mat, and then just bring it to the paper using a fine-tipped brush. And I don't recommend that. If you're going to use that, just make sure you dedicate that brush to that, because my brush almost ruined, but I was able to salvage it. So here I am taking the heat tool directly to the paper, and you can see that that snow just sort of pops up and comes to life. And I actually did the same thing for all over the card, and I love the dimension that that snow gives. It's super cute and really fun, and it brings a little bit of life to the card. So I wound up doing that in many areas. After even finishing the card, I put little snowdrops all over the card too. And then what's a card without any wink of Stella and some glossy accents? So that's what I was doing on the light bulbs, and I believe I also did the nose as well. So as you can see, I've got a lot of techniques, and here is the finished card. Again, the snow is all over the card and all over the snowbank, and I trimmed it to fit a card that is not a standard A2 size card because I like the whole piece. That's my card for today. I hope you enjoyed and got inspired to try this on your own. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.